Welcome to another episode of the Loadout Music Podcast, featuring in-depth interviews with a wide range of music personalities, from Rock and Roll Hall of Famers to Grammy winners and today's rising stars. Recorded in St. Louis, Missouri, now here's your host, Aaron Perlett of Atomic Junk Shop.
Welcome back to the Loadout Music Podcast. We are coming to you today from the Garage at the Intersection. It's a new recording space that we've been developing in partnership with the Kranzberg Art Foundation. And today we are joined by an extremely special guest. And I say that a lot in the opening of shows, but today, not only is it our first return guest ever, but it's my longtime friend, John Oates from Hall & Oates. John, how are you doing today?
All right, Aaron, I'm doing pretty well under the circumstances of some stressful on-tour shenanigans. But hey, what's new, right? I've only been doing it for 50 years, so I should figure by now that expect the unexpected.
Yeah, the touring life, as I've learned over the last 5 years, it's not what it's made out to be.
No, especially in this day and age.
Yeah, and you can end up
now.
at some shitty hotels and and travel and get in hotels late.
Yeah, everything's more challenging. And of course, when you're older, you don't partake in the fun stuff that you used to partake in when you were young. So you kind of take away the fun quotient, add in all the crap that you have to deal with, and what are you left with? Just finding a good place to eat, basically, and hopefully the monitors are good.
So basically a job.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
You know what? It's better than the alternative. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I didn't start playing music until I got sober, and so I missed out on throwing chairs off buildings and throwing TVs through hotel rooms.
Another era,
Yeah, destroying hotel rooms. So, you've had a lot going on the last year.
Mm-hmm.
You have a new album. You also put out a single.
A few singles.
Yeah, a few singles. And I know even you've really been kind of diving into things that are close to your heart as well. I know you were just recently at a teen cancer benefit in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
You've created your own programming as well. But let's just kind of get this out of the way, because I think everybody thinks about it when they see your name in the news today. So, you're going through this process of looking at your life, and you're married, you've got an adult child now, and probably thinking about your estate and getting things set up so you can just kind of be clean about certain aspects of your life financially. And then comes this brouhaha about the lawsuit with Daryl I think it was back in November or December. And that, you and I have known each other since about 2009, and I know you're a pretty private guy, and you like to just kind of take care of business, do it in a professional way, and just kind of move on and do your thing. It must have been kind of heartbreaking.
It wasn't heartbreaking. It was it was really a revelation, and you actually touched on the real crux of the matter when you said that I'm at a point in my life with I have a successful marriage. We're going to celebrate 30 years in November. Our son's 29 years old. And what you said was that I was thinking about my estate, my future, my legacy. That's really the crux of this whole issue that happened. I wanted to make sure that things were clean and tight as I moved forward in my life, and regardless of whether I was working with Daryl Hall or not. That really wasn't even an issue. But as I dug into some of the details of the things that were going to enable me to do that, much of which I can't really talk about due to legal issues, I realized that it wasn't good, and there were things that really needed to be corrected and improved. And I could see that there were things that could be improved very easily, but there was a lot of pushback against changing things and looking at things from my point of view. And when that started happening, that's when the whole house of cards began to fall. And so here again, I have to talk in generalities, but really, and it's honestly, it's quite boring, because it's really based on a partnership that started in 1972. The partnership agreements and the legality of all that stuff was stuff that was written when we were kids. and we're no longer kids. Daryl and I are grown men with different lives, different strategies for our lives, different desires, whatever it might be, whether it's creative, personal, business-wise, whatever. And so when I started looking at the fact that this partnership was really outdated and outmoded, and it could be improved and changed, there was pushback against doing that. So that was really the crux of what happened, and it unfortunately it turned into got a lot of public awareness, and none of that should have, from my point of view, should have even been public knowledge at all. It should have been a business transaction that was handled in one way or the other. And at a certain point, due to frustration, I just said, well, you know what? I'll just sell my share of what I own, and then I won't have to deal with it anymore. But that didn't go over very well, and hence the lawsuit and all that. So that's the way it is, But the in the end, we're very close to coming up with a solution, and the courts have ruled, and all that Sturm und Drang, as they say in German, is pretty much over, which is good. And I feel better than I've ever felt in my life. Honestly, I feel like I've started a new life, and I've got. It's really amazing, the old cliche of when one door closes, another door opens. I mean, it's absolutely true. The things that have come my way and have become, have really manifested itself for me since this whole kind of breakup, I guess, you can call it that, have been incredible and really exciting and really inspiring and creatively, fulfilling. So it's just it's an amazing thing, life. When life throws you a curve, how you deal with it and how you respond to it is really that's what the game is.
Yeah, and to me, it's not like you guys are roommates in Philadelphia anymore. I mean, you've been living very separate lives for a long time.
Forever.
You've been in Colorado, now in Nashville. Yeah. Daryl's up in New York, I believe. Yeah. And I remember you and I talked about this years ago, and you had said, we have a business relationship.
Yeah.
We are partners in this entity, and we get together for a few months every year when we go and tour, and we're playing bigger venues than ever, and it's great. But I always knew there was, you had your own life. You had your own interests. You like cars. You like Americana music. You like kind of, I remember when you were working on Arkansas and you were kind of exploring the blues. You like, being in the outdoors in Colorado. I mean, you've got your own life. You mentioned, your wife of 30 years, and, you got your own thing going on. And it's just, it bothered me. Because we've been friendly for so long, that how personal it was made, and not thinking about it in an adult context.
Yeah.
Like, this is a guy just trying to move on with his life and get his business affairs taken care of. And, I don't want you to have to feel like you have to say anything more, but I found it personally very frustrating that anyone would in any way try to vilify you for simply just wanting to tighten things up.
Tighten and exit. Yeah, it's true. And I don't mind, you're 100% right. We, when we were kids, we bonded over a certain love of a certain type of music, and we each brought a little bit of something of our individual personalities, musical personalities, to the mix, which then in collaboration became something completely original. But that's all gone. People used to say, well, what's next for Hall & Oates, even back years ago? And I'd say the future of Hall & Oates is in its past, is in the history. The music that we made together will stand the test of time. Some of those songs will last forever. And not many people can say that. And I think that's okay. And I use the analogy, I like to look at the analogy of like a pro athlete. There's a certain time when an athlete knows that their time has passed, whether that's because of physical degradation, or they don't have it mentally, they don't have the desire to push themselves and be there anymore. And you need to know when to say when. I think it's really important. I don't like, it's really interesting how some classic artists and some really older, very famous artists, are still trying to cling to the past glory. I think it's important to age gracefully and to exit gracefully from whatever that might be in order to open the door to something new. And that's what I've done, because I may have exited from my experience with Hall & Oates, but I've reinvigorated my creative life in a very cool way. So, it's just one of those things. Time has come, and now it's time to move on.
Okay, well, let's talk about that reinvigoration, because I've been fascinated watching you drop some of these singles over the past year. And even though you told me last night that I was going to hate your new music, which I do not, it's been interesting to see this turn you've been taking. Talk about, creatively the past year, kind of where you've been going artistically.
Well, there's no rules. There's no rules in terms of my creative approach, but there's also no rules in the modern music business, which, like it or not, I have to be part of if I want to get my music out to the public. The Holes, over the last year and a half, releasing a series of singles. I think I released 6. I wanted to it was an experiment, really. I had never released music without a physical component, without a CD or a vinyl or a cassette or whatever it might be. And I thought, well, let me see what it's like to really jump with both feet into the modern world of digital distribution and all that stuff. And I hired a great company that was a digital strategy company, hired a great PR person, had a great social media person, and I put a team together, and I said, okay, and it really was a learning experience for me. I said, how do you do this? How do you release music digitally? How do you follow it up? How do you promote it? How do you get it out to people? What's the secret sauce, so to speak? And it was really interesting. So I released a series of digital singles, and what I discovered was a lot of my older fans didn't respond very well to it because they still are in the mindset of a physical component. So, they weren't ready to stream or download on their phones or whatever it might be. And yet, how do I reach then a new audience or a younger audience who does respond to that way of working, that way of getting deliverables, right? So I learned a lot. It was really interesting. And this new album that I'm doing is, here again, it's completely digital. There's no physical component, although I may do a very exclusive vinyl release on it.
It's funny, speaking of vinyl, it shows my naivety. We've been working on a record, and I wanted to put it on vinyl, and then I had the stark realization that it was more than 44 minutes. And do I want to cut this down and take away, a piece of that artistic body you've created? And I was like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not. Maybe in the future at some point but I couldn't bring myself to do it. So I just went solely digital, because I like you're talking about some of your older fans. I even younger fans today, some of them are starting to embrace vinyl.
Well, vinyl's fantastic,
and I love vinyl. I still have a record player, and but I was kind of bummed.
Well, you've hit a very important point, because the average person probably doesn't realize the physical limitations of putting music onto a vinyl record. There's a limit to time. And what people didn't realize, even back in the day when we were doing vinyl, that was the way we made records. What people don't realize, without getting into the esoterica of it all, as the songs get closer to the center of the record, by the very fact of the physical nature of a stylus in a groove, the grooves have to get smaller. So when the grooves get smaller, there can be less fidelity and less volume. So that's why in the old days, when people made vinyl records, they'd always put a very quiet ballad as the last song, because they could get as much level and volume out of it as they could. Whereas the big songs were always the first or second or third track, because that's where the record was the widest and the grooves could be wider. So it was really a function of the physical nature of a stylus moving inside a groove. People don't think about stuff. I never knew that.
So the bangers come first.
That's why.
That's why. Let's talk about the record. 2 singles have dropped, I believe, on the May 17th. Yeah. The entire album dropped.
Yes.
It's called Reunion.
Yes.
I'm most interested because of how I've seen you discuss what reunion means to you. And I know it was inspired in part by your father, who's getting up there in years.
Yeah, he's 100. He's going to be 101 in July, and I think he's going to make it.
Yeah, which is amazing. But anecdotally, it's more about you kind of reconnecting with you.
That's
taking
right.
stock in you and kind of rediscovering you. Talk about that, because I think that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Well, it's really something, as we talked about earlier, about the legal stuff, the moving on from my Hall and Oates experience. But it was inspired initially by my dad. My dad actually said to me, I'm going to reunite with Mom. And when he said, because my mom had passed away years ago. And when he said that, I started thinking seriously about the actual word reunion, a reuniting. Now, of course, when people throw around the word reunion, it's usually in a very kind of casual way about a class reunion or maybe a family reunion or something like that. But I wanted to dig a little deeper into the actual idea of that. And that got me started. And then, as you said, you've described it perfectly. I began to think about the fact that through this whole experience of starting over again, in a sense, that I had an opportunity to reunite with the true essence of who I am without being, bound or fettered by my association with a partner and with that old music. So a lot of it has to do with that, with this new opportunity that I've had creatively, but a lot of it has to do with moving to Nashville. Because when I started going to Nashville in the late 90s and the early 2000s, I realized I could have a musical home there that I could feel really comfortable in. Because the music that I was making before I met Daryl Hall was very much acoustic, blues, folk music. That was always my sweet spot. But R&B and pop and all that stuff, sure. I mean, I like all kinds of things, But when I got to Nashville, I became part of the Americana music community. I started playing with people like Sam Bush and Jerry Douglas and people like that, and I realized that the quality of the musicianship, the professionalism across the board in Nashville, whether it be in the studio or whether it be with the players or the writers or whatever it might be. And the whole thing started coming together for me. And I said, for me to define myself as an individual, as a musician, I needed to go back to my early musical DNA. And from there, I could rebuild with that original DNA, but enhanced and augmented by the years and years of experience and the fact that I'm more mature. And so it was it was like a revelation to be like, okay, I'm going to go back to go forward. And that's what I've been doing incrementally on all these recording projects.
I remember you told me once that when you first moved to Nashville a couple of years ago, that you were really struck. You were talking about the quality of the musicianship there, and you were like, it made me realize that I had to improve my chops.
Right. True.
I was thinking about, well, shit. That's
Well, it's like anything else. When you play the same show for years and years and years, and essentially play the same songs over and over again, it can be very easy to become lackadaisical. It can be very easy to become routine in your playing and your approach, because there's things you can do in your sleep. And it's not challenging at all. And I really wanted to challenge myself. So when I did start playing with new musicians who really were playing on an entirely much higher level, quite frankly, I realized that, and I always make this kind of analogy of, my reputation could get me into the party, but in order to stay at the party, I needed to be able to deliver in some way, shape, or form. And I really did. I practiced my ass off. I mean, I woodshedded. I went back and as I said earlier, I revisited the old stuff, the stuff that I'd been playing since I've been a kid, but now with more skill, more technique, and I started there and then basically used the skills that I had as a child, but now with the with the fact that I'm just a better musician in overall, to create new music where I could take those same approaches, but really elevate them to a higher level through my better technical ability.
Yeah, it's what fascinates me in getting back to the kind of the reunion analogy is that years ago you had told me that you looked back on who you were in kind of the 70s and 80s, and that there were some things about the lifestyle then that you weren't really proud of. And that you were trying to kind of, you had moved beyond that. You were in a different phase of your life. So it seems like you've now jump ahead to now. It seems like you're kind of on this, to a degree, this continual evolution of growth. A lot of people think that you reach a point where you're done growing, but it seems like you're very focused on this kind of continuum of growth, spiritually, musically, in every aspect of your life. Does that resonate with you?
I think you got me. No, absolutely. When I, the 70s were crazy. I wanted to be, a pop star, rock star, whatever. I wanted to travel around the country and tour and party. And, of course, who wouldn't, when you're a kid? I mean, especially in that era when that's really what that was the style of the times. And in the 80s, all I did was just run around the world and just like at the top of the pop world, when things are thrown at you. Luckily, I have a lot of self-control, and I never got into drugs, luckily, and I never was much of a drinker. So at least I was able to keep my mental and physical stuff together. So that I didn't lose it on that, in that side of things. But I feel like this is a time in my life, and I hear again, going back to that thing, how you need to be able to age gracefully, whether it's age creatively gracefully or physically gracefully. And I think it's time for me to give back. This is a good time for me to give back. I've been so blessed. I had so much. I've achieved so much. I still have, I have incredible, a lifestyle and wherewithal. It's all, it's time for me to give back in a sense. And that's, my wife and I are very conscious of that. And so we go out of our way to make sure that we try to contribute in our way. And I love when I can do it and it has a musical component too, because then it's the best of all worlds.
One of those things is the Oates Song Fest. Talk a little bit about that, what that is.
That came during the pandemic when everyone was sitting at home. I realized that all my musical friends and people that I knew and people that I didn't know, for that matter, everyone was home. And people started to do a lot of Zoom performances. They started to use the internet to communicate much more. And my wife and I talked about it, and we had been contributing to Feeding America, which is a great organization for so many reasons. Food insecurity in America is really a shame that it actually exists. And when you walk into a supermarket and you see all this food on the shelves, and then you think there's actually American families who don't have food, there's something wrong here. So we got involved with them, and then we said, we came up with the ideas. What if we just reach out to our friends and say, hey, just play a song on the couch, or go in the studio, or do whatever you want, and just contribute a song, and we'll see if we can contribute to Feeding America. And Feeding America got on board with us, and the response was overwhelming, because there's all these great artists who really weren't doing anything. They weren't touring, they weren't recording, they were sitting at home, and it was wonderful. The outpouring of great music and stuff like that. I mean, Dave Grohl from Foo Fighters, I reached out to him, and he went in and he did, I don't know if you saw his segment, but he actually, he talked about Everclear, and he talked about how he wrote it. And then he did this amazing performance that was totally spontaneous. You could tell that there was no edits. It was just this magic moment of him with a guitar telling this story. And that clip, which now is on YouTube, which he did for us for our little charity event, has become viewed millions and millions of times. but it was just great. And everyone, Sean Colvin and Sarah Bareilles and, I mean, the people who just did this were absolutely amazing. And so it was wonderful. I think we generated 450,000 meals from that alone. And it was all done from the living room, from the various living rooms around the world. So that was great. And that lit the spark as well, that we could do things like that, and we could, be part of something that, where we could, affect some change.
Speaking of the pandemic, do you feel like, I feel like we're still in this weird this after haze of the pandemic. In terms of live performances, like I go out to shows and I expect to see these big crowds all the time, and I think people are still kind of stuck to a degree. You're on the road. What are you seeing on the road or hearing from fellow artists?
Well, I think everyone was very excited to get back, to playing again. One thing I noticed, the first tour I did, small acoustic tour I did, right, as soon as the pandemic opened to the point where venues were beginning to open again, it was really weird. I'd go to a venue and there'd be no staff. Like, they didn't have a sound man, or they'd have a sound man who didn't know how to work the board, or they'd have people backstage who'd never worked a show. They didn't know how to, it was, and so we would go in, and I know our sound man, the guy we carried with us, would have to go and reprogram the console, literally the sound console, because it hadn't been used in 2 years. It was weird. And there was things like that would happen all the time. Now it's much more together. Now everybody's back, and we just played an incredible show at the Musical Instrument Museum in Phoenix, Arizona, which, by the way, if you've never been to, is incredible.
Never, no.
They have a venue there. We did 3 nights there, and the staff there was like first class. I mean, amazing monitors, amazing lights, amazing front of house guy, which is, so it's definitely back, it's definitely back. And we had great shows. And I've noticed that, we're playing small listening venues. They're much more suited to the type of acoustic show that we're doing right now. And it's great. So I think, I feel pretty good about it.
And so you're doing some extensive touring with just you and this 4-piece right now.
Yeah. Well, it used to be me, then it was me and a percussionist, then I added a cello player, and now I have added a pedal steel and a guy who plays pedal steel and electric guitar. Because the pedal steel and the cello are major sonic components of this new album. I'm not sure if you hear that on the album, but there's a lot of padding that sounds like string sections and things like that. That's actually a pedal steel and a cello together. It's a really unique sound, and I've really leaned on it on this album. So I needed it to try to replicate the feel of some of these songs, and they're great, amazing musicians.
Well, I know you're on the road. You've got the new record coming out, in the next week. Really, you've got 2 songs that already dropped. What else? What have we missed, John?
What have we missed? Well, I just finished an amazing show for Teen Cancer America, which also just became an ambassador of that. That's the Roger Daltrey charity. And Roger's very proactive with it. And we did a private show at a house in Pacific Palisades, California. Well, the house was, incredible, right? And they literally put up a full stage, lights, sound, monitors, backline, the whole thing. I mean, a full concert stage in this guy's backyard. And it was Pat Benatar with her band. It was Ryan Tedder, who did a great show where he told about all the songs he had written for Adele and Taylor Swift and Beyonce and blah, blah, blah. Roger Daltrey played some Who songs and some of his own more little different type of stuff. I got to play with Roger's band. And it was just, it was really cool. And I love the fact that we've done some sessions now in the studio with some of the young cancer survivors, and they're great. A lot of them want to write songs, they want to record, and we've done one in LA and one in Nashville. So here again, just trying to be part of a community that is helpful. And here again, it's when it has a musical component, then everybody wins.
We've said it all, John. He is a Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. He is our first return guest here ever on the Loadout Music
Am I the
Podcast.
only one who wanted to come back, Aaron?
That might be true, but I'm not. I will never admit that publicly.
No, don't do that.
Never. But John, thank you so much for giving us your time. And
yeah, man.
Good luck with the new record, and
Thank
good
you.
luck on the tour.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Loadout Music Podcast, hosted by Atomic Junkshot frontman Aaron Perlett. Find all of our episodes and more at loadoutmusic.com.